So, actually, I came here 2 years ago, just after the lab started, and gave a little introduction to the lab. At that time, we made a lot of promises. We, wanted to get people excited about the idea of the lab because it was an intriguing thing for Microsoft to go set up a research lab in India. Since then, as it says, we have come a long way, and today I'm, really happy that I'm able to come back and tell you about the progress that we have made in 2 years. Okay, so basically, I don't think many of you were in the audience 2 years ago. So I say the mission is still the same, which may not mean anything to you, but it means a lot to us. When we set up the lab, we modeled, the goals of our lab and the mission, basically the same as all other worldwide Microsoft research labs. And as many of you may know, Microsoft Research has 5 labs around the world. 2 in the US, the one in Redmond and one in Silicon Valley, Mountain View. And there are 3 international labs. The Cambridge lab was the first international lab. Then we had a China lab, which both of which are thriving. And now, most recently, starting in January 2005, we have the India lab, which I've had both the pleasure of, creating and managing up to now. Or I call it coping, whatever it is. So it's kind of a fun lab. So basically, Rick Rashid, who is my manager and the head of Microsoft Research Worldwide, Senior Vice President for Research at Microsoft, likes to point out that the mission goals for Microsoft Research has been the same in the 15 years that it has existed. Microsoft Research just turned 15 last fall. And in India, we've only been 2 years, and I'm proud to say that our mission goals have remained the same. And our first and foremost goal is to do great research in whatever area we do. There's always a little bit of confusion when it comes to India regarding this. Many companies and others talk about labs in India, but they are what are called R&D centers, and they are really predominantly focused towards product development, if that. And they do research, and when they do research, it's obviously in service of that particular product development agenda. Now, in contrast, in MSR worldwide and in MSR India, we just do research, without any specific product development agenda in mind. In fact, I often like to point out to people that you wouldn't want to buy products that we make in MSR because we're not really very trained product developers. However, of course, working for Microsoft means that we have a vast, army of developers, and probably, the largest and the best in the world, to develop products. So we have a great opportunity to take our technologies, have impact on the end users through the Microsoft products, and we work with all the product divisions in Microsoft to do that. So they own the product agenda, business agenda, and we do research. And they also do their own research. However, we have the opportunity to do it in a manner, that we choose. Now, one agenda that is very important to India, perhaps more so than in the US, is to work with external institutions, the universities and the government, in order to further technology research in India. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about it towards the latter portion of my talk. And we spend about 15% of our budget and quite a lot of my own personal effort and other effort in this last part of the agenda. So what have we achieved in the 2 years since I came here last? I think I came here roughly around this time of the year, 2 years ago, to be honest. The lab was less than a month old, maybe a month old at that time. We have now 50 researchers, 50 full-time staff, about 40 plus are researchers, and the remaining 8 or 9 are administrative management people like myself. We call them overhead. And, we've grown a lot. And in 2006 alone, we grew 64%. And we have had 81 interns in the last year alone. And overall, I think we have about 120 interns so far. We've kind of solidified into 6 research areas. And we have one team that is responsible for advanced development and prototyping, and largely manages our tech transfer and other prototyping effects. We've been publishing a lot. And, like in any research institution, one of the ways you measure your performance and your progress is by the quality and the quantity of our publications. And I'm happy that we're doing very well on both counts. Not only we've got a lot of papers, but already a few award-winning, prize-winning papers in major conferences. We've been working with all the product groups to do technology transfer in a number of different product areas. And as I said, we have a strong external research program. This is at the interior of the building. I think back a couple of slides ago, I had an exterior picture of our building. And this is an interior. And one of the things that we're very proud about, and I hope this will kind of entice many of you to come and visit us, is that we had an opportunity to design the layout of our building ourselves And Sean Blacksweat, who is one of the leaders in our team, and when the lab started, he's not on the research side, but he's on the prototyping side. And at that time, of course, we didn't have a technical agenda 2.5 years ago. He personally designed the layout of the lab, and it's one of the nicest work environments that you can find anywhere. So let me go through the various items. First, about people. As I said, we've grown to actually 49. That was a few weeks ago when it was 46. But anyway, it's grown since then. And we have about a dozen women. And of this technical staff, there's about 43 now. And about 17 of them are PhD. And we have more PhDs still from abroad than from India. And they've been in various places. And in the technical side, we have 7 women and 36 men. Now, why do I mention these things? One of the things, challenges that we knew we would face, but at the same time, one of the opportunities was going back to India and setting up a lab, was a lack of availability of a large number of highly trained, high-quality PhDs. As many of you know, or some of you know, a number of PhDs in computer science that graduate out of all of Indian universities per year is between 35 and 50. So the number is less than the number, probably the Berkeley CS and EE departments put together or produce individually. And numbers in EE is not that much more. So how are we going to, create a research lab in this climate? Back when we set up the lab, one of the premises was that, the lab would, attract a lot of trained Indian researchers from international institutions to come up and take leadership and create an environment in which we can train other people to work. Secondly, as a part of our being there, and as well as where the timing of economic growth and so on are, we anticipate a good growth in the number of PhDs in India during the coming 5 to 10 years. And so we are partly trying to catalyze that process as well. I want to pause 1 minute and say something, which is back in 2003 December, not even 2005 when the lab started, one of the things that convinced Dan Ling, who was the research director for Microsoft Research Redmond, and has been a great champion of our India lab and really was the primary force behind helping me get it going, was actually sort of convinced by Richard Newton, the late Richard Newton, to look at India as a place to do technology research, especially in the context of ICT for development. And I would say today, if it hadn't been for that encouragement from Richard, we would probably not have a lab in India. So I really miss him, to be honest. And we used to call him our uncle, both him and Raj Reddy. Anyway, so what we have found during the time is, in fact, gradually we are not only attracting Indian PhDs to go back, but we are also, then these Indian PhDs are at various levels of seniority. We are also gathering more and more PhDs from India to come and work for us. But however, if you notice, a good portion of our researchers are not even PhDs. And the way we staff that is, let me see if I have, is that we take people with BTech and bachelor's and master's degrees and have them work for 2 years in a position we call assistant researchers. After 2 years, they have to go on and do something else. Our intention is not to, keep them long term, because I sort of was schooled in a tradition, and all of us were schooled in a tradition where you really have to go through a serious PhD process to fully train to become a researcher, and not only gain your credentials, but also gain that experience in an academic environment. And plus also, socially get networked with the right community and right people, and you get the right pedigree and things like that. So we have been doing that, and in fact, some of the first batch of assistant researchers are all, finishing this summer, and some of them are actually applied for PhDs, I think, in Berkeley and other places as well. You'll see some of them here. And we will continue to have more of those youngsters come in and go. And it also increases a lot of awareness among their peers in Indian universities about PhD as an option, as a career, and research as a career, and things like that. So these are just some names of people. You don't have to bother. This is one of the funny things about being in a research lab like a university is that we don't normally dress up. So we have to create an artificial dress-up day once a month, where you're not allowed to wear casual clothes, but you have to wear something more dressy. And of course, opportunity for dressing up are much greater in India than here. We have had a strong intern program, and the interns, come from all over the world. We've had about 120 up to now, and this summer, during the peak season, we expect to see about 70 plus interns in the summer alone. And that's been a rich source of students to work with. Once again, one of our mission goals being to promote the idea of research, we see these interns not only as people who work for us, but as ambassadors who are carrying this message back about research, as an exciting prospect and a career. And this is just some pictures from sort of back 2 years ago. We were a small team, and now, we've grown to a point where, we have to go to the rooftop to get our picture taken. So in the next section, I'm going to talk about some of the work that we are doing in the 6 different research areas. I'll just briefly skim over each area and talk a little bit about 1 or 2 projects in each area. Definitely won't have time to go into depth. And I would suggest you go into our website and dig a little bit deeper, and you'll find more information. Okay. One of the youngest groups is actually the Cryptography, Security, and Algorithms group. And the group, as you might expect, focuses on, it's a very mathematical area. As many of you know, it involves in hash functions and factorization and elliptic curves. And one reason we realized we should start this group in India is because the raw talent at the level of number theory, mathematics, and core computational theory is actually quite strong in India. So Ramaratnam Venkatesan, we call him Venki, he's actually a researcher in Microsoft Research Redmond. And he is somewhere at the bottom here. He's the head of the group. He still actually works out of Microsoft Research Redmond. So he splits his time 50-50 between India and Redmond, and is actually heading the group. Since then, he has hired a number of people who are mathematicians and other computer science researchers. And the group has been doing quite interesting work in pretty much all different problems. So just sample of some of the projects that are working on. I'm going to not talk about each of them, but simply point to, now I get to use this thing. Okay, 1 or 2 projects which I think is interesting. One of them is this. This is not directly related so much as to cryptography, but assumption being that in the worst case scenario there may be corrupt data for machine learning, for instance in spam control or something like that. How can we use stochastic learning methods in order to actually successfully learn to categorize even in that process? Another work, as I said, is that some of the work that's going on in elliptic curves. Elliptic curve cryptography is probably in the long run, has a lot better shot than even things like factorization and RSA. So we have some work going on that. One of the things that we are doing is, as much as doing crypto protocols and cryptography, we also do cryptanalysis, meaning what are the sort of weaknesses associated with this existing crypto protocols. And there's been quite a long tradition of trying to attack hash functions, as some of you may know. And what we are doing recently here in this is looking at introducing some relaxation type methods in SAT analysis, SAT solvers, and looking at hash functions, how to penetrate hash functions. And made quite a lot of progress. It's not yet broken. If it's broken, it will become front page news. So hopefully, they're even more secure than what we think. Another very interesting project is that for detecting piracy, viruses. One tradition is to actually compare code that is authentic code and code that might be considered or suspicious of being corrupted. And a lot of the traditional methods have been on the basis of string comparison, which, as you might imagine, limits what they can do. There can be various simple changes that a user makes in terms of rearranging code or variable changes and things like that. So we have been investigating graph-based matching methods to look at the control flow of of pieces of code to understand where there may be problems. Okay. Again, those are just some of the projects. You can look at our webpage to find out more. Now, the second area is digital geographics. Now, digital geographics, is an area where we specifically were interested because there are very interesting opportunities for map and location-based information and services. But more importantly, probably personally, Kentaro and myself have a certain background in visualization and computer vision and graphics. And we have a small group trying to look at applications of those, not so much doing core computer vision, but applications of those in the context of online maps, online imagery of places and things like that. And many of you might know that Microsoft has this Windows Live local project that provides you online map service, and been doing 3D scene representation. There are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. One is a project we are doing with respect to automatic visualization. That is, if you have a stylized visualization of an area, this is actually of a panoramic view of certain parts of Seattle, but now not rendered as in the image, but kind of stylized to give a certain type of appearance. And can we learn from examples of those to create new such ones based on data? The other project, oh, sorry, this is a little bit in reverse order. Sorry, let me switch. So it's a very small team. Kentaro Toyama is the acting and for the time being permanent head. I just want to pause for a minute and talk about Kentaro. And I might have mentioned in my previous visit, Kentaro Toyama was a vision researcher working with me, or in my group anyway, in MSR Redmond, since 97 or so. But in 2004, when I decided to set up the lab, I just asked him if he would be interested in moving to India and helping me set up the lab. It didn't take him more than a minute to say yes. And since then, he's been the assistant managing director and probably my principal right-hand person in getting the lab running and things like that. And he's also the head of our Technology for Emerging Markets research group, which I will talk about a bit later. Okay. Now, another project, there are a number of projects besides the stylized visualizations. One of the key projects is actually doing 3D geometric streaming, which is instead of thinking about streaming audio and video in the context of these type of online navigation, especially of cityscapes and so on, there's a fairly interesting problem with respect to how to stream polygons and graphics. And Saumyajit Deb, who's actually an assistant researcher and currently doing his PhD in the International Institute of Information Technology. It's IIIT. It's one better than IIT because it has 3 I's. And he's doing his PhD and is working in our lab. Okay, so he's been working on that. Now, another group which is actually, in a sense, very young, but in a sense not so young, is what we call Mobility Networks and Systems. Now, we actually used to have a group called Hardware Communication and Systems, which came out of a previous group called Sensor Networks. So originally, I went in with the idea of starting a Sensor Networks group. But as we were trying to hire people to lead that group, I found out that a lot of people who are working in that area were not quite of the type that we wanted. So Chandu Tekat, who's actually one of our systems researchers in Microsoft Research, Mountain View, Silicon Valley, was kind enough to sort of shepherd our group through for a couple of years. And being a systems guy, he renamed it Hardware Communication and Systems, although Sensor Networks is one of the topics he's working on. The group expanded its charter to looking at general internet scale systems in the networking area, distributed systems, wireless and mobile computing, as well as sensor networks. Now, most recently, this group is sort of reformed itself as Mobility Networks and Systems. I'm really happy to mention that Venkat Padmanabhan, the kind of the middle name in that page there, is also from Microsoft Research Redmond, has agreed to move back to India and head this group. And he's hired a couple of people, Ram Ramji, who's been at Bell Labs, and Ranjita from IBM Yorktown Heights. And Ganesh and Lenin are a couple of young assistant researchers. These are the ones who are non-PhD, but have turned out to do some very interesting research work, and they will be moving on to PhDs in some other places, in probably later this year. And we've had a lot of friends. Some of the projects that we are doing is, one thing we realize is, in a country, in a situation, it started out as thinking about what can we do in India, but really it turns out to apply everywhere, as one might expect. Is if we don't rely on networking via standard PC, but what can we do with mobile phones in the space of networking and data connection and data transmission? There are quite a few projects that this group has been doing jointly with Sean Blackswood, who is the one of the heads of the advanced prototyping group, on peer-to-peer networking of mobile phones that are based on proximity and learning who there is, but doing it in a way where it's securely connected, and you have to know, or you have to have somebody's permission to do it before you can do it. And also, can we distribute downloading on mobile phones across a set of phones that maybe around? Maybe your friends have phones, and you want to leverage that connectivity, and then use something else like Bluetooth to get it all together and so forth. So some very interesting sort of local proximity-based networking, especially in the mobile context. And another project which we're doing in collaboration with IIT Bombay, it's really led by IIT Bombay in the sensor network area, is SenseLight, which is a sensor system for detecting landslide. And the project is at a state where there is a core sensor now unit, and we've done some little lab-wide testing and looking at some amount of field testing in a real what do you call context of railway line monitoring across sort of an area which is prone for landslides and so on in India. That project continues together with Professor Uday Desai of IIT Bombay. Now, Multilingual Systems was naturally a group that makes sense to think about when you go to India, right? Because as again some of you may know, India has something like 16 or 21 official languages depending on how you count and who you ask. The states are dividing according to languages, and umpteen number of dialects and scripts and things like that. And again, these languages differ from each other perhaps more than European languages because their scripts are not even similar. But it's a country with lots of people moving around, working in different cities and working together. And in fact, the percentage of number of people who are trained, qualified and fluent in English is less than about 60 or 70 million in India out of 1 billion people. So although you might all think that given the kind of students you get, every Indian speaks great English, but that's not really the case. And one question that constantly comes up is, if you want to build a new language capacity on a system, you can always build it as a silo. You can build information retrieval, web search, a user interface, maybe character recognition, handwriting recognition, and translation from specific languages to languages for that language. But every language you end up redoing the whole thing. One thing that we are looking at is, can we create a framework in which we can actually make it easy to add new languages, which also means that if that works out right, you may be able to switch between languages for the same user or different user as if there's no difference. And many times, in any sort of applications, you have to go into one language and then you have to switch language and to go into language. Can we change those things? And being in India gives us a lot of motivation to do this kind of stuff. The group is led by Dr. Kumaran, who has a PhD from the Indian Institute of Science, is previously worked at Oracle and has a lot of database level experience, and a few other young people who have been working at. And basically, we've broadly divided the research into 3 broad topical areas. Text, which is really where we are concentrating, a little bit on the phonemic, speech side that we are beginning to do, but also glyphic, which we'll hopefully get to someday, but right now we are not core looking at that. Now, the kind of problems we are looking at are the traditional ones: machine translation, summarization, developing ontologies for the purpose of search and retrieval, but also transliteration, which is probably less widely done actually, but it turns out to be a very interesting challenge and a problem, again, in the context of multiple language community. Things like street names for maps, you have to transliterate, and you have to do it right, because if you get the spelling of your favorite national or political leader wrong in my language, I'm not going to be happy. So your transliteration has to obey certain patterns and rules. That is not that obvious actually. But it turns out that the core sort of idea that drives a lot of these things is really being able to learn from examples. So a lot of the current progress in the language area actually comes because of statistical machine learning techniques and techniques that learn. You still have to introduce certain set of language rules, especially for sentence order, word order, and things of that sort. But by and large, you don't have to highly hand engineer it. You can actually learn it. So, that's the kind of approach we are taking, both for translation and transliteration, and to some degree for multilingual IR as well. And we have to do certain support type of work, such as, for instance, parts of speech tagging and conversion of character sets, and broadly, have to create the corpus. And so, one of our primary, focus areas, as I mentioned some of these things already, is actually the collection of corpus. And this is not, like if you had asked me 2 years ago, where would be spending a lot of our initial effort, I would not have said we're going to spend a lot of effort in corpus collection. But if you now think about it in hindsight, that was in fact the first thing we have to do. If you're going to use techniques that are learning from data, we have to have the data. So we have actually started a very large and significant effort in collecting corpora in Indian languages. Basically both to support our internal research and work with many of our partners outside in creating an ecosystem for collecting corpora and sharing corpora and standardization of annotations, corpora, of pause tagging and things of that sort. Broadly looking at sort of 4 broad activities. First of all, of course, acquisition of corpora. So we talk to anyone from newspapers to book publishers to people who are doing things on the web, to even government or technical government documents, or parliamentary sessions and technical documents. Microsoft has a lot of technical documents. Now, one of the interesting things, of course, is that learning from examples, you learn the thing that you put in. In other words, if you put in technical documents, you'll be very good at translating technical documents, not cricket scores. In India, translating cricket scores, I think, is far more important than technical documents. And so you need to collect a wide variety of corpora. The second, and we've been working with a lot of organizations to do that. The second part is defining the standards with respect to, especially like parts of speech tagging, and coming up with what are the core set of tags that you have to do that. And it turns out that that process is not trivial. So we have been creating a committee of experts, so to say, to do that. And looking at other types of community contributed collaborative efforts where we may have a single place where different organizations may be willing to contribute their corpora. Let me see. So the last part is that one of the things, actually the third thing actually is one of the things we mentioned is that we are looking at a wiki sort of like approach where we can put out some translation based on whatever technology there is and have users actually correct it over time to provide more data and looking for incentive means for doing that and so forth. It turns out that similar efforts are going on in our Redmond lab for Western languages, and so we're like syncing up that for Indian languages. The other thing is that sometimes, how do I put it? This thing is not mentioned here, is that when you collect corpora for machine translation, the ideal thing is to have sentence level parallelism, sentence here and a sentence here. But what you get often, a lot easier to get, is paragraph level translation, or maybe even beyond that. But a lot of time paragraph level. So you may find a journal that is published in 2 different languages, but obviously they don't translate sentence to sentence. They'll translate paragraph to paragraphs, or maybe even beyond paragraphs. But from that, can you infer sentence level, parallel sentences through, again, some machine learning techniques? So that's one area we are exploring. Okay. One of the, again, areas that is natural to look at in working in India is software engineering. And one of the things we realized when we went to India was that although MSR has a strong software engineering research group, a lot of it has been primarily focused on systems level software, platform software, because that's what Microsoft does. So a lot of the research has focused on dealing with verification and program checking at that context. Now, in India, we have a lot of enterprise software companies, the system integrators or SIs, who build, good portion of world's software, as you know. I mean, companies like Infosys, Wipro, TCS, and so on. And so we always felt that we have an opportunity to partner with those companies to learn about what are the key challenges their developers and designers face in the context of that type of software. So we have actually been quite closely talking to some of these companies and looking at how we can develop high-level tools or verification methods for enterprise software. But we also continuing our core system level software. Sriram Rajamani is the head of the group, and we have a couple of senior people there, like Ganesh and Ramalingam, and a few young people. This group, as you might expect, is one of the core traditional computer science research groups. So it is quite active, publishes in a number of different places. And a few projects that may be worth mentioning is we started a project called Yogi, which traditionally, there are 2 methods for verifying if a program was doing the right thing. Actually, I think I have a slide on it, so let me pause and talk about it when I get there. Another one that we are doing in the same context is profiling paths, which paths were visited, but doing it in such a way that paths that are more often visited, are numbered in a way, indexed and numbered in a more efficient way than paths that are rarely visited. Various other code level analysis. We're also working on in the area of configuration analysis and security. Can we automatically check what are all the potential vulnerabilities a system may have based on the set of privileges that may have been allocated to different types of users? I mean, if you have, say, administrative users or regular users, and there may be so many different files and resources that have been given privileges, sometimes it's possible for something that is done by a user to be picked up by the administrator for the wrong end. So these are natural vulnerabilities and potential inconsistencies, and can we do an analysis? In fact, using logic analysis, we can actually detect all the vulnerabilities that a particular configuration and system may have. And the last one is more related to what I was telling you about enterprise software. Can we, in fact, develop languages and methods. For instance, in database, there is object-oriented database and relational database. A lot of times, it's easier to design in the object space, but of course, finally, you have to translate it into relational database. And there are many tools to do this OR, translation between object and relational databases. Can we validate that round tripping, that it's preserved the integrity automatically and things of that sort? So variety of projects. This is the one I just wanted to mention. It's also called Synergy. You might recognize Tom Hensinger, who was a faculty here and was Sriram's advisor. He's now at EPFL. The group is basically looking at how can we combine verification and testing. In other words, traditionally there were, you can think about two methods, right? Testing finds places where a program may fail. You throw data, you throw examples at it, and if it, does the wrong thing, then it's done the wrong thing. So that's got a problem. And verification tries to prove that it's doing the right thing. And in fact, they both, work to a certain extent, but we realized that if we combine them, in fact, in the process of verification, if we can generate selected test cases to reveal where there may be problems, and likewise, in the process of testing, we can introduce some verification, we can get a lot further. I mean, fundamentally, proving a program correct is, an undecidable problem. So we are trying to make it as scalable, as efficient as possible. This paper, won an ACM Best Paper Award last year in the FSC conference, actually. There are a number of papers in this group, I think, decided to list out some of the key papers. I guess the one thing I want to pause and mention in that context is, as is the tradition with other MSR labs, we publish everything we do. And in fact, even when we patent something, we submit the paper for review and typically file a patent during that time, so that, of course, a patent is filed before the paper is publicly disclosed. But we publish it anyway, or we publish it after we patent it. We don't have any sort of patent control by management where I or anybody has to go and say, okay, you have to run this through our lawyers before you actually publish. We let people publish. And the researchers and research managers usually make the decision on what they think is worth patenting. We rely on their experience, especially research managers, to understand what is strategically valuable that may be worth patenting. There's no, we have published over 60 papers. We don't have the budget to patent 60 things, actually, to be honest. So, we patent only a percentage of what we do, and a lot of other stuff is just published and left in public domain. I mean, this is true of all of MSR research, and what we are doing is nothing different, actually. Now, the last group, which is in some sense the most intriguing group and sort of the unique sort of group for our lab, is the group which we call Technology for Emerging Markets. And, the goal of this group is really to understand the role of technology in the context of socioeconomic development, especially in the rural cases and urban middle class, and then look for technology ideas that may, support that finding, based on that. One of the things we deliberately didn't want to do is to sort of think technology first and society later. So this is reflected in the mix of the group. The group is consisting of a diverse group of people, actually. If you think about it, we have people who are looking at broadly society and the public policy, economic sort of sense, all the way down to the individual level. And, there are some technologists also at the bottom who are actually creating the solution. Kentaro Toyama heads this group, and, in 2004, he had never done any work in this space. So when he started going to India, was the first time he learned about it. And, I would say he's now, clearly one of the leaders in the field, trying to set the direction for the whole field. And as some of you know, we have strong collaborations with some of the faculty here, specifically Eric Brewer, Anno Saxonian, and Isha. Anyway, so a lot of different areas. We work anything ranging from education to the intervention of technology in the context of agriculture, dealing with people who are computer illiterate, also doing studies of rural PC kiosks. Some of that is technology, some of that is just studies to find out what's the state of the art. A couple of recent new things that's very interesting is the role of technology or the usage of technology for micro entrepreneurs. So let me just switch over to that slide. These are some of the staff here. At the bottom is Randy Wong, who was a faculty at Princeton before he came and joined us, and is working on some project related to education. So just a snapshot of some of the project. Okay. So for example, this one I was talking about. So one of the very interesting things is if you go, what's a micro entrepreneur? In India and many such countries like that, you would find that there is, you don't have to iron your own clothes, right? There's a guy who has a little ironing stand. This is a little bit like a taco truck or something like that you might see on your campus here, who you go and give the clothes to, and a few hours later he'll give it back to you, all the ironing done. There may be people which are small shops that are selling goods, everything from a vegetable vendor. These are people who are at a scale, they fall below all kinds of economic calculations and measurements. So we call them micro entrepreneurs. And there are different categories of them. And Jonathan has been doing a fairly systematic study about how they are using information and communication technology. And he broadly divided them into 3 categories. People who use no IT, people who use things like phone, and especially mobile phone, and people who use something like a PC or a computer. And the middle point is where the very interesting opportunities and sweet spots are. If you look at India, there are more than 200 million cell phones now, and it's growing faster than Korea now, I think. And people realize its value, especially in the business space. They use it, of course, both as a personal device and as a business device. After all, these micro entrepreneurs are just individuals or small families that are running it, so it makes no difference for them. And what kind of services can you bring them using that kind of a medium, right? So that's one project I just wanted to highlight. There are a number of other projects, and I don't want to go into them right now. Again, you can find out more. But this is one project that's kind of such a sort of a gratifying thing that it's worth mentioning. It's sort of become our icon for the type of thing that we are trying to do. So here's a project where a bunch of our social scientists and Uday, who's an engineer, went to villages and looked at how computers can be used in school. There's a lot of interest in using computing technology in education, right? Now, India is a country where there are 600,000 villages and about 700 million people live in those villages. And many of these villages don't even have a school, right? And when they have a school, they don't have enough teachers. However, it's not uncommon nowadays for government schools to have a computer in many of these places. And the interesting thing is, although there are potentially private schools nearby, parents might send them to these government schools which have a computer, because the private schools don't have a computer, because it's immediately believed that having a computer and having your child study in a school having a computer means that the future job prospects for that child are greater. And there is some very course level correlation, which is probably true actually. However, typically these schools have can afford one computer, at most 1 or 2, and there are tens of students, right? And the teachers are not really trained to use the computers very effectively, so they don't really get used. But they become fantastic babysitting devices. When the teachers are busy, grading or doing other things, the kids would play around with the computer. But as you might expect, with one computer and tens of kids, they're all wanting to play with the computer. And what do you expect? The picture above, right? You have one computer, and everyone surrounds it, and they're all excited, but it's really one kid that ends up using it. And it's typically an upper class male kid that would dominate it, right? The others become shy and go away, and after a while, they don't even come. Now, the team went and looked at these things, and just out of the blue came up with an idea. Rather than trying to buy more computers, which is, obviously a good thing to do, but it's going to be challenging. Why not find a way to leverage this one computer and allow many kids to simultaneously use it? And so, very simple idea. So they came up with the idea of, using USB, connecting multiple mice to the same computer, but each mice has its own cursor associated with it. And there is software, that we developed just as a sort of a toy software for games and so on, that would allow 2 or 3 kids to play together with their own cursor. So it could be like guess the word game, or guess the letter, read out the letter, or something or the other, right? Type in the letter, something or the other. And it can be anything that you can do, really. So it's a very simple idea. We call it one mouse per child. And I think it's a little cheaper than a laptop. And, we've started actually, one of the nice things about it, this actually got the Microsoft product teams excited, that we developed a software development kit so people can develop application software based on this, which is now that one of the Microsoft product groups is already productized. So it was one of the most rapid tech transfers that I've seen in my time at MSR. And we were also able to publish some papers out of it, so that's like a double win. Another thing that we were doing in this space is looking at text-free user interfaces. Of course, that's a very widely done topic in HCI conferences and things of that sort. But in the context of dealing with illiterate first-time PC user, you face particular set of challenges. The domain we took was domestic, female workers who are looking for domestic jobs. Now, this is a euphemism for household servants, of course. As in India, that is a very common thing. But the way they find jobs is through word of the mouth. They talk to each other and say, so and so house has a job. Are you interested? Or can you find me a maid? You ask somebody and they try to find you one. If we had some sort of a computer facility, not necessarily they all have computers, some place where they can go and find about jobs, what would be a user interface look like? So we worked very closely with the community of women who does that. Indrani Medi is actually a person with a design background who did this work. And basically what we found was, as much as the user interface were important, there are a couple of things that became more apparent that we did not even think about in the first place, which is really how to get them to even touch a PC. They all believe that if they touched a PC, the PC will probably break because they don't know how to handle it. Now, it happens to me all the time. I touch a PC and it breaks, but I didn't think that was true of everyone. And so, we created this introductory video to entice them and had a lot of voice feedback and hand-holding. And one kind of a cute thing that comes out of this is this. See, when you ask somebody to design an interface and say, I want to show a picture of a house, what would be the standard icon? I'm not going to ask you because the answer is obvious. You'll put two lines this way and a rooftop. If you put that to a domestic worker in India, they'll think that it's a poor village house. So you have to put a house like this to designate that it's actually a person who may have a job for you. These like cultural contextual things that you only think about when you do them. And in fact, more broadly, this group was looking at what are the core set of criteria with respect to interfaces. Video versus animated drawings versus still pictures. How do I customize an icon in a slightly more general way rather than for just looking at the individual cases? So the group is expanding its scope there. That's a big summary of the 6 research areas and what we are doing. I really didn't do justice to specific projects. It's much more intended as a way of inviting you to explore them on your own. Please look at our website and contact the various researchers to know more. But now I just want to move on to a couple of other things. Good place to take stock of how we are publishing. So we have published about 60 papers, and frankly, this number changes so fast that this slide is about 3 weeks old, and it's probably wrong. And we've been quite a few under review. So very productive. And even though I'm not one who believes in bean counting, I don't mind counting beans when we have them. It's only when you don't have them you don't want to count beans. Okay, so we're doing well on that department. And a couple of good prizes and so forth. Now tech transfer, as much as doing this basic research, and I hope I conveyed the idea that all these research that we're doing is based on whatever we think is our interesting technology and societal challenges and individual researchers' interest. However, if we don't ultimately get it to the users and if we don't work with Microsoft products, it sort of doesn't make sense for us to be a Microsoft research lab. So, we have a great opportunity here. I always say, what is the more gratifying? To see 500 people in a computer vision conference applaud you for having a fantastic research, or, 1 billion people using your piece of technology on their laptop every day at home. I think the latter is a greater glory. And working at Microsoft definitely gives us that chance to do that. So what do we do in the India lab? What we did was to create a group which is explicitly responsible for advanced development and prototyping. These are people who are not necessarily researchers and usually are not researchers, but come with fair amount of development background from Microsoft itself typically, but also from other places. And they look at prototyping and writing code that would be palatable to our product groups. So the philosophy is code talks. You go show a MATLAB demo to a product group person, they say it's cool, but what am I going to do with it? But then you show them that underneath the hood there is actually good C# code, then they get more interested. Not that they'll take that and productize it because your code is still far from the quality that they want, but it certainly helps them to take you seriously. And it also makes sure that we do things right, actually, to be honest. And this group has got about 9 people. Joseph Joy, who was a 16-year Microsoft veteran, moved back to India to head that group jointly with Sean Blacksword, who also liaisons with the product groups and things like that, and a small team of younger people, both ranging from designers to developers, working in doing a variety of projects. Now the group, model is very simple, right? This group is those green, red, and blue arrows that you see is essentially this group, okay? And we have already done some tech transfer, as you see, some of the things on the left in the multi-mouse, which is called multi-point. We did some work with respect to in the digital geographics, a project called Virtual India, which was a extension of Virtual Earth to include India data and some other features. I didn't talk about it much. And things in the crypto and the software engineering area. Now, Virtual India was one of the things that we did. We kind of got it done in January 2005. We promised the Minister for Science and Technology that we will do something like this within the first year. So in January 2006, we actually revealed an online prototype. The same minister revealed it. We worked quite closely with the government to get government-approved data. And some of the features were multilingual annotations. Our transliteration work was really triggered by this. And community annotation of specific features. And also a tile rendering system, which was underneath the hood, that now is being seriously considered by the product group. And that technology has all been transferred to Virtual Earth and Windows Live Local. The other thing that this group is mostly doing more recently is looking at mobile phones. Once again, one of the things that keep coming back when you spend a lot of time in India and looking at where the opportunities for technology and what kind of platform may be suitable, you realize that there is a lot that you can do in the mobile phone space that is not being done, and it probably is a lot more relevant and will go a lot further than just relying on the PC. Now, the other interesting point is that there are about 200 million cell phones in India, out of which, I don't know, I thought it's less than 10 million, but somebody told me it may be close to 20 million phones are data rich. You can download data and they have data connection. Most of the others are more basic cell phones. The most popular cell phone in India, some of you would already know. Guess which one it is. Sorry? No, it's the Nokia old-fashioned little phone. It's a phone that you can throw at people, and if they don't catch it, and it won't break. It might break their head, but it won't break. It's a very robust phone. It doesn't have any data capabilities. It's a very simple, sort of user interface. But it's very widely. It's cheap. It's most of the time almost free. And the interesting thing is that in India, and which is something that I'm finding with my 15-year-old, maybe because he spent some time in India, is text messaging, which is in India called SMS, stands for Short Messaging Service, is very, very, very widely used for everything. SMS is, more easy way to communicate than even speaking. In fact, I almost think that in India, many of the young people think of SMS as their primary communication medium because they can do it anywhere. And if they happen to be stuck in front of a PC, they may use IM or something. And further, they think of email as offline IM. So, really the cell phone is the way to go. Now, can we do a lot of interesting, provide a lot of services and other types of things through SMS? So it turns out there are actually quite a few interesting things to do in the SMS space, and this group has been prototyping some ideas on its own on that. So other projects we are looking at, has to do with this, clarity thing that I mentioned. We are prototyping how to write asynchronous programs in a way where you do it at eye level so that you don't have to do all the grunge work and make a lot of mistakes and so forth. One of the projects we are working on with the Windows Live product team is global address geocoding. Different people in different cultures write addresses in different ways. Can we learn from examples to create the correct GPS coordinates based on that stuff? Things related to mobile banking and variety of other projects. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is this group works with the research groups, but also does its own project wherever it sees interesting opportunities. And some of them may be related to product groups, some of them working with outside people. So it kind of has an independent agenda. More or less, though, this group, whatever this group does, is not something that you will get easily published in a conference or a journal. But more than that, this group's, the staff is such that they're much more excited to do them and show the demos than to actually publish papers. So we want to retain that culture. So we have a lot of product group interaction, so won't go into those details. Okay. So that's, again, I want to take stock of where I am, right? Just give you an idea of broadly the kind of research that we do and how we are working with product groups and engaging in tech transfer. The last, and to me, in some sense, one of my own personally sort of interesting parts that I spend some of my time on is external research and program. We were fortunate to hire Vidya Nadampalli, who actually has a lot of background in consulting for high-tech companies in the area of PR and communications. And I met her first when she organized the ICT for Development conference in Bangalore. I think, Tom, you were there, back in 2004. And she helped me, actually advise me on how to go about setting up a lab and all the interesting politics and nuances and so forth. So subsequently, she had a consulting company called Perception Consulting, and Sridhar was her partner. Subsequently, we hired both of them as full-time employees to manage our external relations and communications. And we have now recently hired a new person who's about to join at the end of the month, actually. But broadly, what this group focuses on, I'll say, there? No. Okay. Broadly, what this group focuses on is that they are responsible for all our outside relationships, academic, government, industry, media, and when I say academic, they can be both. These can all be Indian or international. Okay, so they broadly oversee those relations. The actual interactions are obviously at the technical staff level for many collaborations, but we need somebody to make sure things are done right and that we make commitments that we keep, and legal issues and image issues, and how all these things work, right? So this group is responsible for managing them. So they work with all the research groups to that. Now, one of the first things we did when we started the lab was to create a technical advisory board that consisted of many of the leading scientists in computer science and related fields in India, and some of those names you might recognize. And these are all senior people in various IITs and other types of institutions. And we also have a few international advisors, including Malik, who was here earlier, and Eric Brewer from here as well. So we have a strong board of advisors, and once a year we have an annual review meeting, which happened about 3 weeks ago. In fact, these slides I prepared for that meeting mostly, and where we talk about what's happened in the last year, and then we otherwise have a lot of informal conversations with all these partners. I talk to each of these people at least, I would say, once or twice a month, and some of them more often than not, understanding what are the challenges in positioning ourselves and working with our partners in India, right? Because people always wonder what we are about and what we are doing, and are we going to steal all the great researchers from Indian academics to work for Microsoft, or are we going to help them in their goals? Now, in terms of our external research, we basically see ourselves having 3 goals. As I mentioned, about 15% of our budget is spent on this, and we don't expect direct technology or IP returns for it. Okay, it's really in order to create an ecosystem or environment where we can be successful and others can be successful. Sort of the 3, we have done a lot of things. Again, I guess I shouldn't fail to mention this. Before there was an India lab, we had an external research program activity in India, Microsoft Research had, starting around 2003 or 2004. I was actually partly involved in it. In fact, I was sort of the technical ambassador for that program, and that's what led me to think about setting up the lab and so on. So we have had a long involvement with India. But once we set our lab up, it gave us an opportunity to talk to our partners in the academic institutions and the government closely to re-understand exactly how to strategize and create some new programs and readjust our programs. We are broadly concerned about 3 things. One is capacity building, which is simply how do we increase the quality and quantity of the number of PhDs and researchers in computer science in India. And I keep saying computer science, although we care about other things. We are a computer science lab with some EE and other areas thrown in. So EE, CS, but not biology or something. The second thing is that we find in a lot of times, people would ask me about globalization when I went to India, outsourcing. I always say that research is the most globalized thing, which is not exactly answering the question. But the truth is, in research, you cannot be a great researcher unless everybody in the world who is a part of your community recognizes your research as being important. So one of the problems we noticed in India is that there are very good people doing interesting things, but their connection with the international research community is not nearly where it can be. And some of it is travel restrictions or limitations on travel funds. Some of it is just the culture of that's doing it there. And it's changing because a lot of young people are coming out of international programs and are looking to maintain those opportunities. So we actually have taken it specifically as our goal to sort of nurture and foster international relationships, not only for the lab but also for our partners and so forth. And we organize workshops and conferences organize and do a lot of academic collaborations. In the capacity building area, we have PhD fellowships. Travel grants is a way of sending students to international conferences, which they normally don't have funds to travel to international conferences. Internships we think is a very important part of creating this awareness about PhD. We do RFP-based funding, research sponsorship, and things like that. Couple of things that we are doing that are very interesting is that we have a summer school, which topical summer school, we organize in different topics. Last summer, there was a crypto summer school. It was a 3-week school, intense preparation for doing research in cryptography. Got some world leaders in the area to give lectures. We had about 80 students who participated, selected from about 250 plus applicants, and organized by Venki and some of his collaborators in India. And we sponsored and ran the whole course. This year we are looking at doing a summer school in NLP, natural language processing. We also organize topical workshops. We are trying to create a sabbatical visiting researcher program, not only for international visitors, we get quite a few of those, but having Indian faculty spend some time in the lab and looking at shared postdoc programs with Indian universities and things of that sort. I'll talk about Tech Vista a little bit later. We are now looking at trying to work with non-PhD granting institutions, because typically the PhD applicants pool from in India for the PhD schools come mostly from non-PhD granting universities. So we are looking at how we can try to create greater awareness there. Now, in terms of the global reach, one of the programs that I've been talking to our partners about, including today, is we are looking at taking some of the PhDs from Indian schools, having them spend some time in the lab, and then perhaps finding a mentor to spend some time in some other international school for 6 months or a year, so that they'll gain more experience and so on. Again, our internships extends internationally, and we are constantly making collaborations with various researchers from various schools. And the 3 countries we have been starting to discuss this, usually with select universities, is US, UK, and Israel. Israel, it turns out that there's a lot of interest in the crypto community in Israel to work with the people in India, actually, with the researchers in India. We've organized a number of workshops and conferences, and this is an ongoing thing, and either organized it or co-organized it. I think the couple of ones that I want to highlight are this one, ICT for Development Conference, which happened last summer here. This was jointly organized by our team and the Berkeley team, Anno and Kentaro, who did a lot of the work. And I'm very proud about this because in this area, as many of you know, there have been a lot of symposia and so on where passionate people who are passionate about their work, come and talk about what they have done. But there hasn't been a scientifically rigorous conference where there's peer reviews and things like that. And it's an interdisciplinary field where there is an opportunity to create something like that. And this was the first conference, was sponsored by IEEE and ACM, and from everything I can hear that it was very successful, and the next one will happen in December 2007. And particularly proud to tell this audience because there's a joint partnership with this university. Right? Tech Vista is worth mentioning. This is an annual event that we organize. Basically, it's our signature research symposium. The purpose is simply to get the message that research is exciting. So we invite about 6 or 7 world-renowned researchers, not of Indian origin, not working in computer science, can be anything really, and just talk about what they have done. It's a technical talk for an hour, but addressed to a lay audience. And then we tend to have a panel to talk about the state of research in India. This year, for example, the theme was how to make India a powerhouse in research. Okay. In addition, this year we also organized a poster session for PhD students from Indian universities. So we completely own and sponsor this and take care of all the expenses. The first year it was coincident with our inauguration, and and the picture is from actually the second year. I didn't have a picture from the first year. The second year, you see Minister Kapil Sibal, you inaugurated it, and basically, we had about 150 people in the first year and about 500 in the second year. This year, we had about 900. We're sort of trying to grow it to a larger extent. The audience comprises of students from all kinds of colleges, in engineering colleges in Bangalore area, outside students, or faculty and student contacts from the rest of India. Also IT professionals in Bangalore. And it's a lot of work. It takes us a full 6 weeks of almost full-time work to organize this actually. And this year the keynote speaker was Dr. C.N.R. Rao, which is over here. He is one of the most leading scientists in India. His area is material science, and he is the head of the Prime Minister's Scientific Advisory Council, and used to be the director of Indian Institute of Science at one point. And he gave really a fantastic speech, sort of beseeching people to look at research and some of the challenges there and so on. And we got amazing amount of coverage, even though he's not like a minister. The media really took note of it. And this is, just some scenes from the event itself. A lot of academic collaborations ongoing with different universities, professors, India, abroad, things like that. That's just something that we'll continue to do. And people in our lab are always teaching courses in local universities and such. And we also collaborate with non-governmental organizations, especially in the ICT for development area. So we keep ourselves busy. Just a few funny highlights. This is sort of the lighter side of life. Hello. Didn't want to go. Okay, now it went. I guess it's just delayed or something. Okay, so we have an annual retreat for the lab, where we all go out and try to bond and things like that. Frankly, it's such a social lab. I don't know if we really need to go anywhere to bond, but it's nice to get away with some excuse. One of the quote-unquote highlights, a low light, were last April, noted film actor in Canada. Is like the big icon for the masses, actually, who acted in all these movies where he took the cause of the masses and so on, died. Unfortunately, he lived very close to our lab, or unfortunately, we put our lab very close to his house. And because his fans were so dedicated and could not get to see his body in the funeral and this and that, there was a huge riot in Bangalore. And all the buildings that had glass were stoned in Bangalore. And our building was no exception. We lost pretty much all our windows and had to replace them, but we had good insurance. And we had people, again, like Vidya and our facilities manager, Vinod, who was native Bangaloreans, who saw this coming and told us to shut the lab and go home. Yesterday, actually, there was a bandh in Bangalore, and we shut the lab again for some other reason. This time we put nets to catch stones, but there was no stoning. Anyway, so we are all fine now. But this is, interesting experience that I don't normally think of as part of running a lab or something like that. The joke is, according to Professor Pandurangan, one of our collaborators from IIT Madras, Microsoft research is only a stone's throw away from Rajkumar's house. So this is something not too relevant. That's Kentaro. I just figured that I should show this picture. Back in 2004, he participated in a Diwali festival wearing Indian. And that woman has nothing to do with our lab. And Sean Blacksweat, these are the first two people I hired. And Sean is the one who designed our interior and so on. We have fun. For those of you who are not from Bangalore and don't know this already, can you guess what this is? So it's called Gold Class. There's a recliner seats where you can recline all the way, and they serve food, and you can fall asleep and completely not watch the movie if you don't want to. I love going there because everybody else watches a movie and I get good sleep. And then we have a lot of fun activities. We have this German intern who is precariously balancing himself. So thank you so much, and that's going to be me in a few years, one way or the other. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Yeah.
So, do you think that this topic of ICT for D is gaining legitimacy within the Indian academic research community as a respectable area to do research?
So I'm not sure if there are more people working on it than used to be honest. Okay, if that's the question. However, I think more people are now willing to take it seriously as a research enterprise than they were before. And even they might have been working on it, but now they're willing to write papers about it and get it reviewed and things like that. So I hope so. But the funny thing is, I think, just in terms of volume, there's probably more people outside of India working on this than in India, which is true of any research area. So I don't know. This is unique to that. See, back in the Media Lab Asia days, there was a big buzz about these things in India. But that sort of, didn't continue. And this is, I think, a sort of a better way to do it because it's internationalized and no specific thing.
any major differences between MSR Redmond and MSR Bangalore? I mean, you told us a lot of ways in which they're similar, right?
See, what we expect to happen, right, is not that in the fundamental structure and concept that there should be any difference. I am a strong believer. Best model for a research lab is to be similar to an academic institution. People work freely on what they want. You hire people on the basis of how good they are, and then you give them the freedom to do whatever they want. Okay, because I think otherwise researchers won't thrive. However, being in India naturally influences to pay attention to certain problems that our Redmond research teams may not do. For example, of course, ICT for development is an obvious one, but even the work on mobile phones and SMS, and we focus a lot more on the services space or the language computing research, right? These are things that other labs work in the space but won't focus on those topics. So that is just something that we expect comes out of just being there. And one of the things we explicitly decided is that people should be informed by what's out there, rather than just saying what will serve a specific product group in Microsoft, right? So I think we are seeing some of that, but and the other thing is that the talent pool. One reason, for instance, we set up the crypto group is because the theoretical computer science talent in India is quite strong, and we expect that area to grow as a result. So there are two things that make it unique in the talent pool that's available in the context of India, and hopefully that difference will go away, because in the long run, India will talent in all the areas, and so it doesn't matter, right? But for now, anyway, it's there. So I call it inspired by India, actually, the kind of research that we do, not so much, specific to India. So we don't try to make it different, and I'm afraid if I try to make it different, it will become kind of pigeonholed in a certain niche, and once that fad passes, we won't have any reason to exist. So I want to just create a good computer science lab in India.
You went from 0 to 50 in 2 years, so what's your target for the next 2 years? Is it 100?
My target was not 0 to 50 in the first 2 years.
Okay.
It's just what we got. Next 2 years, wherever we get. See, the thing here is that research, right, is that ultimately a matter of being able to find the right people. I certainly don't want to have an ambition to grow to 100 or something, right? I'm not able to find the right kind of people and end up getting stuck with people who require a lot of help and managing. The best way to make my job easier is to hire people who know what they are doing, and so I don't have to do anything, right? So really, it's a matter of finding people, and wherever we go, we go. So no specific target. Yeah. I don't think I'll expand into more areas immediately, because right now we have 5 or 6 people in each areas. I would like to bring it up to at least about 9 or 10 over some time, but it's not up to me. The researchers have to hire themselves, and so that's more of a critical mass and consolidation in those areas. We may choose a new area if we find someone who's fantastic in that area, who knocks at our door, and we just can't let go of this person and so forth. But then I have to scratch my head and say, how am I going to balance all these things, right? So, yeah.
To what extent are the Microsoft Research Labs autonomous units? How much cross-lab activity is there?
They are autonomous units in the sense that each lab, actually Microsoft Research autonomy goes down all the way. When I was managing the interactive visual media, the computer vision group in Redmond, our researchers did whatever they chose. So there is autonomy pretty much down to the researcher level. Now, clearly at the lab level, there is a little bit of strategizing and agenda setting. Like I said, I want to consolidate. That is individually determined by the lab management and done. So what I do does not affect what our SVC lab does or what our China lab does. And what they do doesn't affect me. In fact, many times I don't even know exactly what they're doing. Okay, I meet them once or twice a year and find out. That's it. However, we have a lot of cross-collaboration. Many of our researchers spend time in Redmond, so collaborate. We have a lot of collaboration with SVC and a little bit of collaboration with China. And that is entirely spontaneous. When people, find partners that they want to work with, they'll go and work with them. So cross-collaboration is always done at the individual level. As you might expect, we have more collaborations with the Redmond lab than other labs, only because we end up coming to Redmond a lot and meeting. And it's a bigger lab. It's got 500 plus people, so great opportunities to collaborate. Okay, thank you all very much, and I hope you'll come and drop by, see us sometime.